Hey everyone, glad to see you joining today. Happy to welcome you to this webinar, which is STDs and STIs Breaking Free. I am Dr. Pavini Moray, and this webinar is part of the free monthly webinar series that Wilcelium offers, and we are spreading pleasure on purpose. And we typically ask our students in our audience, hey, what do you want to hear us teach about? And this topic was a particularly hot topic. Help, I need to know how to talk about my STI with partners. So, and I say that just to normalize that so many folks are dealing with this, of course, right? We know this intellectually. You deserve to feel really confident when you talk about having an STI or talking with a partner about having an STI. So today, in the next hour, we'll be talking about when to disclose, why to disclose, how to move forward, how to talk about your status with partners, how to talk about testing, and we'll talk about a bunch about shame and stigma and what to do about it, and really transforming STD stigma into what it really is. So that's what we're up to for the next hour. And if you would, just go ahead and type one word into the chat. When you think of STDs, what's a shamey, stigmy word that comes to mind? Go ahead and type that into the chat. I'm seeing dirty versus clean. I'm dateable. Good. What else? Promiscuous, of course, sure. Yeah, good. So let's just to clarify, I'm going to be using the terms STI and STD interchangeably, and I just want to clarify what is each one and why. STD is sexually transmitted disease, right? And STI is sexually transmitted infection, and these are often used interchangeably. However, infections are really only called diseases when they cause symptoms, and many STIs are asymptomatic, right? So just to know that, I trend more towards STI just because I think it's less shamey than disease, right? And people will use both. So just for context, the World Health Organization says that there are an estimated 357 million new cases of STIs every year. Over 30 different types of bacteria, viruses, and parasites that can be spread through sexual contact. The most common STI in the United States is HPV, and that can be passed through vaginal, anal, oral sex, right? And sometimes symptoms of HPV do not develop until years after infection, sometimes never. And so it's possible to really be in a very long-term relationship, not know that you have HPV, right? Not have any symptoms. You might even, be married before you discover it. So why disclose? And I think I trend toward, well, it's the right thing to do. We want consent. Consent is super important, right? And having all the information, or as much information as possible, really allows you to make an informed decision and allows your partner to make an informed decision. If an STD is not treated, it can cause serious health problems sometimes, right? If they're not treated, they can really impact fertility. They can actually transmit to children that pass through bodies, right? So telling partners past, present, and future about your STD status really gives them a chance to get checked out and if need, get treated, right? And it allows them, again, to make those informed decisions about their own health, because you want that, right? You would want to be able to make that decision for yourself. Another reason to talk about it with partners is that if you are being treated for an STD and your partner isn't getting treated and you don't tell them and they don't get treatment, you can get reinfected, right? So, who wants to get reinfected? So tell them, right? And just, not to be scary or anything, but it is illegal. It's illegal in some places to not disclose, right, your status. So in some states. So you want to tell people it's definitely the right thing to do. And it's a hard thing to do. And I know this from personal experience, from on my own end, and from experience with lovers who have told me it's a hard thing to do, right? So let's talk about how to make that a little bit easier. Yeah. So let's say that you are in a new relationship and it looks like things are maybe going to get sexual. And if you have an active STD or STI, it's super normal to be nervous about having this conversation, right? Everyone's going to raise the subject differently. It can be super tough to talk about. Unless you are abstinent, it's a discussion that you need to be able to have. The more you have it, the more effortless it will be when you have it. It might never be effortless, but it will be more effortless. So it's not easy, but don't put it off, don't avoid it. Instead, when you bring it up clearly and calmly, here are some things you can do. So if you have been tested, you can say so, and you can ask if your partner will do the same, right? And remind your partner that knowing your status for both of you will help both of you relax and enjoy the experience, yeah? Telling your partner that you care about them, that you want to help them stay safe, suggesting getting tested together. These are all things that you can do ahead of time to talk about how are we going to keep each other's bodies safe. Yeah. If you're in the kind of relationship that can produce babies, having the talk about birth control, it can be an easy in to this conversation, right? Obviously, it's best to talk about it not right before you have sex, right? So if you put it off, if you're like, oh, I don't know how to talk about this, and I'm worried about how it's going to land, and you put it off, and then there's the moment, it's going to be really hard. It's going to have more charge than it needs to have. So sometime around the second or third date is probably a good time to bring it up if you haven't slept with them yet, obviously before you sleep with them. Bring it up when you have your clothes on. Bring it up when you're doing something normal, like making coffee or having dinner, or it's daytime, right? You're not in bed naked between the sheets. Yeah, so I think that the kind of the win, if you front load it in that way of thinking about like, okay, when's going to be the most optimal? And then that's just your plan. That's where you rest in this of like, I will disclose to my partners before I'm sexual with them. I will disclose when we're fully clothed, etc. Right? So that you know what your own plan is. It is important, just because many STIs are asymptomatic, that you get tested at least once a year. You and your partner and your partners, right? That everybody's getting tested regularly. And if that is also a hard conversation to have, you can bring that up by suggesting that you're going to get tested. Like, oh, this is part of how I take care of myself. I get tested every year. Want to get tested together? Like, what are you doing Thursday? Let's go get tested, right? And then we can get coffee or whatever. Make it fun. So yeah, when you are going to tell someone that if you have a STI, you know it, and you're going to tell them, how do you do this, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to say that how they react is really a reflection of their own knowledge and their own comfort or lack thereof, and not a reflection of their feelings about you. Right. So I remember that the first time a lover told me that they had herpes, it was the first time a lover had ever told me that, and I was surprised, and it's like, oh, it was before we'd had sex, and I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this, and I needed some time to do some research about it and to see like what's going to make me feel comfortable in order to move forward with this person sexually, which I ultimately did. If someone is judgmental, if they're fearful, if they express hurtful rejection, it's likely a matter of their own discomfort in general with sex and sexuality. We're going to talk more about this, talk about the stigma of STIs more. So it can help for you to be really informed about how your infection works, how it's transmitted, how it can be managed, to really dispel if they have any misconceptions or lack of information, to really be prepared to share that information with them. And this gives you that opportunity to be really upfront and to let them know that you care about them and that you're proactive in this matter. It builds a lot of trust. And it also gives them a chance to decide if they're going to continue with you. And if they are angry with you, if they're scared, if they don't want to continue with you, that's okay. They don't have to, right? And you gave them a choice, they took it. And it's interesting because that's actually not somebody that you want to be with anyway. Like if you have an STI, you can't actually have a partner who's super judgy about STIs, right? And so here's where disclosing earlier works a little bit like a litmus test, that you are you're disclosing earlier and you're sharing that information earlier, and then if it's not going to be a fit for them, that you know that, right? And then you don't have to invest more energy and time, and likewise they don't either. This again can be super uncomfortable. It's vulnerable for you. This is I mean, not for everybody, but a lot of folks have shame around this, right? And it feels really vulnerable to talk about it. And this is an opportunity for a partner who is awesome and who is going to continue to be with you to really step forward and be like, oh, okay, well, let me understand more about that, right? And if somebody has that response, obviously, awesome, good. Like this is the kind of person who I can have for my sexual partners. You know, so many people, I think, are super great about getting tested and having this uncomfortable conversation. And there's some people who would rather not know, right? And they're not going to get tested. They want to live their lives without knowing if they have an STI. And because several of the major STIs are asymptomatic, it can be pretty easy to ignore. However, not getting tested because you're afraid or because thinking, well, I can't possibly have an STI, right? Because whatever reasons. I've been talking to a lot of folks about COVID lately, and I've heard so many amazing things of like, well, I know I don't have COVID. I'm like, well, how do you know? It can be asymptomatic. Like, oh, I just know, right? And this happens, you know, we have magical thinking, right? And so this can happen with STIs. So it can have consequence if you are in that, well, I couldn't possibly have an STI. Well, why not, right? So getting tested, right? And getting comfortable getting tested. And if you are, let's say you're in a relationship and you get tested, you thought you were like totally did not have an STI, you get tested and you're like, oh crap, I have an STI and I'm in a relationship. Don't panic. It's not the thing to do. First of all, you're going to talk to your healthcare provider and figure out, well, what do I need to do to treat this, right? And then you're going to talk with your current partner. You're going to talk with other recent partners. You might seek out support from support groups for folks living with STIs. Also, you want to not assume that your partner cheated on you, right? If you have that kind of relationship. Where cheating is a thing, is not necessarily true, right? It might have been an infection that you've gotten from a previous partner that's taken years to show symptoms. And so really, you can talk to your doctor, you can talk to your healthcare provider, figuring out like, well, what's up? Where did this, how long have I had this? You know, you can get answers to some of those questions. So when you are talking about being positive, you're already positive, you already know you're positive, and how are you going to talk to your potential partner about your status? This is a situation that millions of people have navigated before you, right? You've navigated it before, and you've lived, millions of other people have as well. So I think sometimes the fear about the conversation can be bigger than the actual conversation. We get to the conversation and we're like, oh yeah, that was fine, it worked well. So we share because it's the right thing to do, because it's responsible, because it's a way to prove ourselves as safe and trustworthy partners. It keeps your partners safer. It keeps you safer so that you're not getting reinfected. Often people's partners are super supportive too, right? So people who live with long-term STIs like herpes and HIV and HPV often report that their partners have been extremely receptive, very understanding, helpful in honest discussion, right? So it's your vulnerability in this is also giving your partner a chance to prove that they're a safe partner to you, right? Something that's cool, and maybe you know this already, but there are, if you're wanting to online date and find new partners, one resource you might check out is online dating services that are specifically designed for folks living with STIs. And you get to choose whatever STI diagnoses you have in your profile and just close that way. And then you don't even have to have this conversation, right? I mean, I guess you kind of still do, but it's, you know, you're not going to be shamed. You know, you're not going to be slut shamed or told you're promiscuous or any of that stuff, right? And this can be a really helpful option for folks who are living with STIs of like, how do I find a partner? The other thing you can do is just put your status in your dating profile, right? So in my dating profile, I disclose that I'm trans, like right out the gate, because I don't want to have that conversation. And I actually want the people who aren't okay with that just self-select out. Don't waste my time, right? You're not cool with it? That's awesome. Go find somebody else. I'm happy for you. And like, I don't have to deal with your BS, right? And so that's another option, is to just be like super direct. And then you avoid the whole having to talk about this thing on the second date. Like, just be like, yeah, this is my diagnosis, you know? It will limit your options, but those aren't actually your options anyway, right? That's the thing to take home here of, those people have, you know, unexamined stuff, or they have different boundaries around their own safety, and that's okay. And you don't have to deal with that, right? There's a way that taking this kind of approach is actually very honoring of your own ability, I think, to be loved, to receive care and affection, having nothing to do with an STI diagnosis at all, right? That you are not willing to expose yourself to, like, those people aren't willing to expose themselves to your STI. You're not willing to expose yourself to their, whatever, their toxic stuff around sex. You know, make sense? If there are folks in your life in general who are shamey about this, or judgy about this, they can make a quick exit, right? You're going to be careful who you talk to. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But those folks don't deserve your trust, really. So having clear boundaries is another really helpful tool in, who do I let in to my inner experience and the things that I deal with. You know, nobody, people have to earn trust, right? And they earn that vulnerability by being safe. So some thoughts on having the actual conversation if the roles were reversed, right? If a lover, a potential partner, was coming to you and had to disclose something, you know, of any kind of nature, right? That they have an STI, that anything else that people feel is hard to talk about, right? What would you want them to say to you? How would you want them to talk about it with you? Yeah, think about that for a sec. How would it feel good to you to hear or receive that information? Your willingness to show up for this, your willingness to front load this with partners shows your care. It shows your commitment to being an honest person living in integrity, right? And we're most likely to trust those folks who are willing to be honest with us and have these hard conversations. So Um, you can be really direct with someone. You can start by saying something like, hey, seems like there's a sexy vibe moving between us. I'm into it. I have to talk to you. I have an STD. Can we talk about what that means? And then you can talk about what kind of STD you have, where you got it, how it's been treated, how you live with it, anything that feels, that's not an overshare. It's just kind of a concise, like, if they're open to having that conversation with you, here's what I know. And you can answer questions if they have questions, right? It's really great to find this out. Like, I remember when the person I told you about, the first partner who told me I had herpes, told me. It was before we had sex, and they came to me and they said, hey, exactly what I just said. Hey, seems like we might want to have sex soon. I need to talk to you about something. I have herpes. I live with herpes, and I need you to know that. And if you feel comfortable moving forward, that's great. And so it had an impact on me, and I sat with it. However, later, maybe a few days later, someone else in the community that we were both a part of came to me and said, hey, I see you've been hanging out with so-and-so. Just want to let you know they have herpes, right? Super skeevy and gross. Like, I was so glad that my lover had told me ahead of time, like that I didn't find out from them, that the other person, right? It was such a blessing to me that that person had the courage to come and be really direct with me and give me the opportunity. Because then when I was faced with that kind of like skeevy, judgy aside, I was able to be like, yeah, I know. They told me. And it totally shut down the conversation. And it also like interrupted that shame cycle of, oh, I can use this information, right? So when you're having that conversation, you want to let it flow naturally, right? Listen. You're not going to do all the talking. You're not going to just tell them the whole story of everything. Have your prepared bullet points that you're going to talk about. Prepare that they're probably going to be surprised. Maybe they won't be. Each person reacts differently. Sometimes people panic. Sometimes people are full of questions. And sometimes people just need time to think about it and gather more info. Don't push them to make any decisions right away. You just hand them the information. They don't have to decide about having sex with you. They don't have to decide about the relationship. There's no pressure. It's super normal after you reveal something vulnerable like this that you're going to want reassurance. You are going to want acceptance, right? And so have a good plan for that. That's not the person you just told. Like maybe you call your bestie and you're like, you set it up ahead of time. You're like, okay, I'm super into this person. I'm going to tell them. And your bestie's like, awesome, tell them. And then you tell them, and then you have a conversation again with your bestie. I told them, oh my God, I'm really freaking out. I'm afraid they're going to whatever, right? So that you have support that wraps around you that doesn't have to come from the person that you're telling, because they're just dealing with their own process around it. Give them some space, right? Give them some time. I know you probably want some time to think about this. You can say that. And it shows that you are confident and that you're not in a shame spiral about it. And encourage them to ask you questions. As you talk, you can give them facts about your STD. And if you can't answer all their questions, it's okay. You can just be like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I can call my doctor, or I can do some research, or do you want to do some research together, and you know this, that an STI is not the end of your sex life, okay? If that is true for you in any way, I can't receive love, I can't have sex, right? I want you to really confront that notion right now, because it's not true, right? So many people have an STI, have a diagnosis, or have had in the past, or will have in the future, right? And so even if for now there are activities that are off the table because of your status or because of what symptoms are presenting, you'll find other ways to connect intimately, romantically, sexually, right? That don't put partners at risk. I think most of us have a pretty good grasp on safer sex at this point, luckily. And there's always, we can always learn more. We can always brush up more if we need we need help with that. That diagnosis freaked out. I was so freaked out, and like all the feelings, right? All of the shame and the fear and the like, why didn't they tell me? And now I have to deal with this, and I have to get it treated, and who do I even go see? All this stuff came up. And so it's totally normal if that all comes up, plus whatever else comes up for you, right? So I think that there's a real role for supportive community in this, of who do you know who's gone through this or something like this, who can support you, who can hold space for you. Maybe it's your therapist, right? Maybe it's your best friend. Maybe it is your partner, I don't know, or a new partner, but knowing that you are now going to be in a process. And obviously some STIs can be cleared up with treatment, and some are going to be things that you live with. And so for you to get the support that you need around it is awesome too. Let's talk a little bit about stigma. Yeah. So as you know already, that there's all these misconceptions and stigma and shame around STIs and STDs. Yeah, they're so common. And you may need to think about shifting your own relationship with how you think about STIs and STD. Like when we talk about stigma, like what have you internalized? What has come into your field, into your belief system around this? What does it mean? What meaning do you make of this infection? What does it say about you? Right? Because I want you to feel into this truth, that it doesn't say anything more about you other than that you are a sexual person. That's all it says about you. Okay? I'm going to give you some other examples. Obviously we live in a culture that is super freaky about sex. We get these super mixed messages of be sexual, be sex positive, be sexually available all the time, be a porn star, and like, don't ever think about sex, don't show anybody, there's all these mixed messages. And my premise is that there's nothing inherently shameful about STIs other than that they relate to sex, which we have so much cultural shame about. And so let me give you these examples. If you are a hiker, if you love to hike, if you love to go out into the woods, into nature, chances are at some point, something will happen to you. You will get a mosquito bite. You will get poison ivy or poison oak. You might even get a tick bite that could lead to Lyme disease. You could sprain your ankle. There are all kinds of things that could happen to you because you're a hiker. And would you feel embarrassed about those? If you love to travel and you love to eat wherever you go, you love to eat the local food, and you end up with a contagious GI condition, and you have to come home and tell your partner, oh gosh, I have this stomach bug, probably contagious. How are you going to handle that with your sweetie? Yeah. So consider these contrasting reactions that we have culturally with HPV, right, which can cause cervical cancer, genital warts, anal cancer, right, versus Epstein-Barr, which causes infectious mononucleosis, which I had as a teen, right? And so biologically, these viruses are super similar. Chickenpox is another one, super similar, right? They can persist for years. They hibernate inside your cells, right? So the virus itself hibernates inside your cells, and they can both wake up. And then sometimes you become symptomatic again. Like if you've ever had chickenpox and then had shingles, you know what I'm talking about, right? Or if you have oral herpes and you've ever had an outbreak, you know what I'm talking about. And mono is the same way, right? So many people may get these viruses and not even know that they've had them, or not even know that they're shedding the virus and are thus infectious. And this is asymptomatic transmission. right? So we don't even know. It's just like how I think at least the results, my partner's a physician, and what he's telling me about COVID is that in tests, the asymptomatic transmission rate is 40%, that 40% of folks who are, I think I said that a little bit wrong, but 40% of the people who are tested and who the results come back as positive are asymptomatic with COVID. So we know that this is true, right? This is mostly how we pass infections to other people, STIs, right, is through asymptomatic transmission of shedding the viral cells. Most people are not knowingly infecting other people with STIs, right? If they have if they have herpes and they have a visible sore, they're not going to knowingly have sex with someone else. Not everybody, but most people, right? Just like, we're all wearing masks now, kind of with the assumption that we might be COVID positive. Yeah. Back to my point. Even though HPV and EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, are very similar viruses, only HPV has an association with shame. No one is ashamed when they get mono. It's interesting. We get them in similar ways. Close contact, kissing, right? So why should it be more shameful to catch an infection from sex than it is from a kiss? That does not literally make any sense, other than we live in a sexually repressive society. So these weapons of shame and stigma, and weapons they are, have been used for a long time, especially against folks who are socialized as female, who are LGBTQ+, who are Black or brown or immigrants or in other ways, elders, right? That there is, STIs are often higher in these groups, but they're higher because traditionally these groups have less access to medical care. And because of how the diseases are passed, right? So again, what does it mean to have an STD? And I deliberately use sexually transmitted disease here. What does it mean? It means that you are someone who has sex. That's it. Okay? And this is, I think, a really great moment to confront the shame around this, the stigma around this, because we're able to just see it during COVID-19 so clearly, how this shaming, blaming, freaking out, pathologizing others, how that happens. We can really see it. We can see it on the news. We can see it in the US response to China. We can really see it, right? And it's the same thing. It's just we can't see it so well because it's often, there's usually there with STDs, but in terms of COVID, we're like, oh wow, I can see this cultural layer that maybe I couldn't see. So let's move ahead under the premise that you acknowledge that having an STD, all it means is that you are a sexual human. And let's actually talk about what to do about the shame. Yeah, because that's the hard part. Okay, great. I can see it. I can see that there's this cultural layer. I can see I've internalized it. What do I do? So it's normal, right? It's normal to feel shame about this. Well, I don't know if it's normal. Your experience is normal. The shame is put upon you. And the antidote to shame is, as Dr. Brené Brown talks about and teaches and researches, is vulnerability, is transparency. You can make a choice to not be complicit in shame around STD and STIs. So how do you do that? Well, first you have to get pretty familiar with recognizing shame as a set of sensations and emotion in your body. How do you know when shame hits, like shame attack? How do you know? What's it feel like? Is there like that, like shrinking, cringing, like hiding, like sinking? People describe it in all kinds of ways, right? When you think about sharing your STD status with someone, what happens in your body? So just take a second and notice that. Yeah, and if you want, go ahead and just, you can type into the chat. Like, what do you notice? Good. Shrinking in chest, tension in stomach, heat in the chest, sensations in the chest, burning, closing, throat closed up, want to avoid the situation. Yes. This is a great description of shame. Contraction. Yeah, totally. Like that's what it feels like, right? Like I just want to like burn and hide out of sight. That's my experience of it at least. Okay. So that happens, right? And then you can just go with that, right? Like shame actually really loves it when you just go with that. Or you can interrupt it. What would it mean to not let shame be driving right now? To acknowledge it, to acknowledge the somatic impact that your body is experiencing because of it, and then to deliberately change your narrative. So the narrative is the story, the meaning that you make about it. Like, I'm dirty, I'm gross, I'm spoiled, I'm broken, I will never have love. Whatever the narrative is, that's a really great leverage point to interrupt it. So, okay, cool, I'm thinking about telling this person who I'm hot for about my STI. Oh God, I feel so shitty. Never mind, I'm just that quick too. Right, that's one way. Or, oh my God, I'm thinking about telling this person about my STI. Hi, shame. I feel you. My body is really contracted. I feel that burning sensation in my chest. I feel like I just really don't want to do any of this. And I'm actually going to make a choice to not be complicit with shaming myself for this. This means that I'm a sexual being. What this means is that I'm a sexual being. I'm proud of being a sexual being. I'm proud of being a sexual being. So my narrative allows my body to respond differently, right? It's not like the shame just like miraculously vanishes, but it's like, I'm not going to just go along with you. Like, thanks for the free ticket to the shame carnival, but I got better plans, right? I got this hottie over here that I want to like, get with. Yeah. So what could you say to yourself? I want you to type it into the chat. What could you say to yourself to interrupt shame and to have a new narrative that you say to yourself in these moments? So go ahead and type it in. So just go ahead and type into the chat, what is one sentence you could say to yourself when shame around STI status hits? That's nice. Being vulnerable is sexy. What else? I am a proud sexual queer being. I deserve support and honesty with my intimacy. Gorgeous. Anything else that folks can imagine interrupting that narrative with? Oh, my STI adds to the abundance of flavor, which is me. Yes, good. Own it. This is part of who you are, right? This is part of your experience. It's like we get to have all the parts of us. They all get to be here with us. So beautiful. Yeah, thanks folks for leaning into that ask. Because basically I feel like getting an STI is almost a rite of passage into being a sexual adult, right? STI shame comes from sexual shame, right? And like, fuck that. No, I'm not here to wallow in my sexual shame. I am here to acknowledge it and to interrupt it and to shift those patterns around it and to really claim the sovereignty of the fullness of my sexuality, right? All of the parts of me get to be here. And this stepping into the new narrative is a really profound practice that can shift that, that shame feeling in your body and how you are with your STI, right? When feelings of shame come up, like that tendency is to keep them secret, right? To not talk about it, what's really going on. But the problem with secrets is they breed more secrets and they breed shame, right? And so when we're not willing to have those kinds of secrets, we were basically saying we're not willing to have that kind of shame. I'm not willing, like, yeah, whatever culture, you can try and throw that at me, but it's not going to stick anymore. I'm actively working against that. And I'm not saying that you have to be the poster child for HPV or the poster child for HIV or herpes. Like if that feels like this is how I need to do it, that's awesome. Also, you get to choose who to disclose to, right? I mean, obviously lovers, but choosing people who are going to be really supportive and who are going to say, thanks so much for telling me. What a big deal. Like, I'm sure that that's had lots of impact on your life. Tell me more about it. You know, tell me how you figured out how to thrive with that. You know, that there is, that is seen as an amazing thing, right? Of really still staying in your sexual power and being someone who lives with an STI. Yeah. And so those people are there and they deserve your trust, the ones who are going to celebrate you for your vulnerability. Yeah. The people who are going to be supportive. So I'm going to pause here and just see if there's any questions about anything that I've shared yet. So this person writes, not a question, but a thought. Another response from a potential lover upon disclosure is, me too, I have that too. Like, oh, how beautiful, right? There's that shared, there can be that shared experience and the comfort of that. Yeah, that's good. Okay. First of all, I want to acknowledge those of you who showed up on this, and it's super brave to come to an STI webinar and be like, well, I'm going to be with other folks who are in the same boat. And so just acknowledging that it takes courage and bravery. And, you know, often we have like 50 or 100 people on our webinars, and I'm just noticing there's just a few of you. So I know it's an extra level of courage and bravery to show up, right, to talk about this and to have this conversation. And so just acknowledging, like, wow, that took some doing from you, and thank you for that. And wanting to share with you a little bit about a few exciting things that are coming up at Wilcilium. So as I said, we have a monthly free webinar series, of which this was a part. Our next webinar is on September 3rd. It's usually the first Thursday of the month. And it's No is Not a Bad Word, Handling Rejection Like a Pro. So we're going to get really good and easy at hearing no. And why do we want to do that? Well, because we want to be able to ask for what we want, and we want no to not be like the thing that like shuts us down, right? So we have to get good at getting fluent in hearing no, so that we can, like, sometimes it's just, you know, a numbers game. We ask for a lot of things and then we hear yes to some of them, right? A couple of courses that we have coming up, and you can find out all about all of these things on our website, wellcelium.org, WELLCELIUM.org. We have the Excellent Online Educators course for teachers coming up starting September 11th. And so this is a 7-week course. If you want to teach online, you will teach online during the course. So you build your curriculum, you do all your marketing, and then you teach your class, and we support you through that whole process. And then integration and of like, what did I learn? Right, so that's a 7-week process that's starting September 11th. Would love to have, it's really designed for folks who haven't done a lot of online teaching, maybe none. Therapists, body workers, movement practitioners, somatics people, yoga teachers, herbalists, artists, folks like that who have something that they have content and that they want to be able to take it all the way through the process of teaching. And then also starting later this month, we have a course called Embodied Boundaries taught by Lindsay Tunkel. And this is for couples. And so it's for, like, you all showed up to do the hard work of talking about STDs and STIs. So couples have a lot of hard conversations that they have to have. And one of them is around boundaries and learning to say no to each other and learning to say no in the short term for the sake of saying yes to staying together long term, right? It doesn't, we know this, it doesn't work to not have boundaries in your relationship, right? Just like, that's not gonna happen. So you gotta learn. So anyway, this class is specifically designed for couples who want pragmatic instruction in boundaries and how to do it, and lots of practice and lots of support. And Lindsay's awesome. And I'm a big fan of Lindsay Tunkel. And so if you and your sweetie want to sign up for that Embodied Boundaries course for couples, that would be awesome. So that's it for today, and hope to see you at our future events. I'm Dr. Pavini Moray for Wilcilium, and keep fighting shame.